Hey everybody, Qroo here. Welcome to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how to translate things like would and would have. I know you might be thinking, well, that's pretty easy, Paul. I would just use the conditional in Spanish, piece of cake. Not so much. We don't always do that. Now, right away, you may be like, all right, so what level is this video at, Paul? Well, I'm going to tell you, if you're an absolute beginner, watch it. I'll be talking about some things that are good for beginners. Now, there's some areas in here that are going to get more complex. So you folks that are intermediate, even high intermediate, are probably going to get something out of this, all right? And if you're really advanced, I don't really think you need a video like this, you know. If you speak Spanish at that level, just go watch television, gab with people. That's how you get better. So let's go ahead and kick this thing off. And we're going to kick it off with probably, I would say, one of the first conditional phrases that English speakers learn. I would like. Me gustaría. Me gustaría. And for you people that are absolute beginners, that is going to be the conditional tense in Spanish. When you say conditional, in English, that is our would. I would like. We learn that one first because we say that a lot in English, especially when we're ordering something. And that's why most of us learn it, because we want to be able to go into a restaurant and say, I would like a hamburger. Me gustaría una hamburguesa. Now, I'm going to tell you, I have never heard a native Spanish speaker order food that way in my whole life, with me gustaría plus food item. And I've spoken Spanish for years, decades actually, traveled all around the Spanish-speaking world. I lived in a Spanish-speaking country for many years, never heard it. Well, I heard it, but I'd always hear it from tourists who learn Spanish as like a second language or trying to learn it. They used it constantly. So if you don't get anything else out of this video, stop ordering food like that. So now you're like, well, how should I order food, Paul? That does change by country and region. You know, if you're over in Spain, they like to use the verb poner a lot. Me pones un café or something like put to me a coffee, order things that way. You're not going to hear that over in Latin America. Very formal would be quisiera plus the food item. Quiero, I want, plus the food items, also very common. And that sounds kind of rude in English. I want a hamburger. Well, depends how you say it. I guess you could say it pleasantly. It might sound very direct to you, but it is very common in Spanish. It doesn't come off as rude unless you put that tone to it. Now you might be thinking, okay, so I thought me gustaría was great, Paul, and I still want to use it. You can still use it. Here's how I recommend you use it. Me gustaría plus an infinitive. That'll be your formula. An infinitive is unconjugated verb. Make sentences like that. You could say something like, I would like to eat. Me gustaría comer. I would like to go out to eat dinner. Me gustaría salir a cenar. And salir a plus infinitive is to go out to do something. Another good one for your word list. Now, as I go through the video, I'm going to be breaking these things down into little categories because I think that that's the best way to learn this. It's also a good way, you know, for you to come back and find certain information for later. So our next category is we're going to be talking about polite requests. And I think this is perfect here because that's one of the reasons why you learned me gustaría in the first place, was to ask people, you know, politely for something. Now, this is where things will get weird. You know, in English, we often use would to sound polite. Would you help me? Would you pass me the salt? Well, in Spanish, people usually just use the plain old present tense for this. I know that sounds very odd because it's like you're saying, you help me? You pass me the salt? Which sounds completely wrong in English. And, you know, especially beginners, they're like, it sounds rude. It sounds rude to me. I should be using the conditional. You know, what's polite in your language grammatically doesn't always transfer over to another language. That's why we have videos like this, folks. Videos like this. So a lot of times when you're asking somebody politely for something, right, you're just going to use the plain old present tense. You're going to make it a question. And it's the tone that makes it polite, okay? May I do this? Would you help me? And that is in the informal. If it was formal, it could be, me ayuda? You help me? Or me ayuda usted? You know, maybe you want to put a por favor, a please in there. Me ayuda, por favor? Would you help me, please? Now in English, I'm still saying, would you help me, please? Because if I said, you help me, please, you're going to be like, Paul, that doesn't make any sense to me. And that's another example, and you'll hear me say this a lot. We don't really translate, we interpret We look at something in the language, whether it's English or Spanish, and then we want to find the equivalent of what that would be natural sounding in the other language. And this is natural sounding, to use the present tense for things like this. Would you pass me the salt, please? In the informal, the tú form, ¿me pasas la sal, por favor? And in the usted form, you're just going to drop that S. ¿Me pasa la sal, por favor? Now, one verb that you're going to hear a lot in the present tense when you want somebody to bring you something is traer, traer, and that means to bring. And this is normally just going to be in the plain old present tense. And we're speaking to the waiter, we're speaking to usted, me trae un vaso de agua? Will you bring me a glass of water? And you can throw in that por favor if you like. But it's literally just saying, you bring me a glass of water. Well, more like a question. You bring me a glass of water? And I keep saying that because I know you're going to remember that. You're going to remember me saying these things. And when you actually go to order, you're going to be like, but I want to make it into the conditional so much. I want to say, ¿me traería un vaso de agua? You can, but more natural sounding to use the present tense, okay? Well, at least if you're just using the verb that way. Let me clarify that a little bit. You could use the verb poder, and you could put that in the conditional. It'd be like saying, could you bring me, right? Podría traerme, what am I asking for? Un vaso de agua, por favor. Could you bring me a glass of water? So you could do it that way if you're just using the verb present tense. Since we're talking about polite requests, I'm going to teach you a little phrase here that's pretty useful, and it uses the conditional. And it would be the equivalent of the English phrase, would you mind? And in the informal, it would be, ¿te importaría? It uses importar, to be important to. And the polite one would use le importaría, meaning usted, okay? And it means, would it be important to you? But it's more like, would you mind? Now, the easiest way to use this is just to plug in infinitives after it. If you're a formula person, you like to break down, Spanish into little formulas you can pop together, which I do highly recommend. If you're an adult learning the language, I think they're easier to remember. You'd have something like te importaría plus infinitive. Or it could be le importaría if you're using the usted form. Would you mind helping me? Do you want to try that one? Because I haven't had any coffee in a while. Would you mind helping me? ¿Te importaría ayudarme? ¿Te importaría ayudarme? Did you get that? Or did you focus on helping me in English too much and try to make that like ayudándome? No. That's why formulas work. Infinitive. Look at the formula, follow the formula. You will make a grammatically correct sentence every single time. And it may be a sentence you've never seen or heard before in your life, but it'll be correct. That is a huge advantage you have as an English speaker learning Spanish. Spanish is such a logical language that, you as an English speaker, and you already have your own language, you understand language, at least yours, you can use logic to speak Spanish. And you can start to make sentences and have conversations long before you've ever developed an ear for the language. But it'll get you talking. It'll get you exposed to the language. You're going to develop that ear faster, all right? Kind of went off on a little tangent there. That's how I teach, though. If you're seeing this video and you don't know how I teach, that's exactly how I teach. I'll go ahead and put a link to a playlist for my Spanish Master course. I recommend everybody start with that. It's going to show you a bunch of shortcuts to give you a bunch of vocabulary in Spanish. It's going to show you how to build sentences really quickly. It really sets up the whole patterns thing. All right, you'll find that in the description section. All right, let's get back to this. All right, how about this one? Would you mind closing the door? We'll do it in the tú form first. Ready? ¿Te importaría cerrar la puerta? And if we were going to do the usted form, what would it be? Say it out loud now. Yeah. ¿Le importaría cerrar la puerta? ¿Le importaría cerrar la puerta? You got that rolling R in that to close. If you want to speak Spanish more slowly, and I do recommend that when you're starting out, slow your pace down. It slows the other person down too, helps you control the conversations, and you're less likely to get tripped up. Now, so far in the video, it's been a lot of useful things, for beginners and some intermediate folks. But things are going to get tougher here, and this is definitely an intermediate topic. And we'll be talking about hypotheticals with C clauses. And C with an accent means yes, C without an accent means if, and that's what I'm talking about in this case. So hypotheticals with if clauses. So what am I talking about? Well, in English, we say things like, if I didn't have to work, I would go to the beach with you. See, there's would again. Remember, that's what the whole video is about, would. We just go down a bunch of rabbit holes, but we're coming back to it, all right? Now in Spanish, this is our formula for that. C plus the imperfect subjunctive plus the conditional tense. So we have our two clauses. One of them's going to have the imperfect subjunctive. The other one's going to be in the conditional. We talked about the conditional, right? Showed it to you. Haven't talked about the imperfect subjunctive though. If you're not familiar with the subjunctive in Spanish, you haven't been studying it or anything, you're not alone. If you take organized courses, say at a college, university, it doesn't usually come up until year 3. And a lot of people only take 2 years of college Spanish, at least in the US, so they never get to it at all. The subjunctive is the keystone to mastering Spanish. It is a mood that is all wrapped into the language. And the imperfect subjunctive is the version of it that runs in the past tense. And I know that sounded like a lot going on, right? Just think of the subjunctive as a different set of conjugations that are triggered by certain grammatical constructions. I call them triggers. And as long as you learn formulas like this, you'll always know to use them correctly, right? Because we just gave you the formula. So here's an example of one. If I didn't have to work, I would go to the beach with you. So we have two clauses going on there. If I didn't have to work, right? That's our first one. The second one is I would go to the beach with you. You know that one of those clauses is going to have the imperfect subjunctive. If you know how to conjugate into it, I'm not going to get into that. You know, that'll take up too much time. I have videos on it. And you know when I'm going to be in the conditional. Now, in English, one of them says would. So that tells us. In Spanish, that's the one we're going to put in the conditional. So we know where to put the imperfect subjunctive. And don't let all these grammatical terms scare you, okay? If you're not up on some of these things, don't worry. You'll get there, especially if you're watching my videos. Si yo no tuviera que trabajar, iría a la playa contigo. And I put the yo in there because we have no context here, and that verb conjugation could belong to first person or third person. Also with the conditional, first person, third person are the same, so I clarified it. In Spanish, if it's very clear from the verb conjugation or context who the subject is, you can leave the subject out of the sentence. So I could drop the yo. And if it was clear from the conversation we were having, I would probably drop it. Si no tuviera que trabajar, iría a la playa contigo. If I didn't have to work, I would go to the beach with you. The next category I'm going to talk about is using would for repeated or habitual actions in the past. You see that in English, we often use would, meaning used to. When I was a kid, I would play outside every day. Now in Spanish, we're not using the conditional tense for that. We're going to use the imperfect tense, all right? Not the conditional. There's two main forms of the past tense, the preterite and the imperfect. It's going to be the imperfect. I know, a lot of grammatical terms here, folks. A lot of grammatical terms. When I was a kid, cuando yo era niño, I would play outside every day. But we're going to be using the imperfect instead, and that looks like this. Jugaba afuera todos los días. And in Spain, you may just say fuera. Jugaba fuera todos los días. Now, the next category I want to talk about is using the conditional tense, right? That's our ia endings. And we're going to be using that to refer to the future when we're talking about something in the past. And, you know, that intro is probably more confusing than this actually is. This will mirror your English, so you won't have any trouble with this. He said that he would arrive late. See, we're in the past talking about something in the future. Don't examples help? They really do. Él dijo que llegaría tarde. And llegaría is in the conditional, just like it is in English. Shouldn't have any trouble with that. I'll give you one more example, just in case you need it. I thought you would call me. See, there's would again. I thought you would call me. Want to try that one? I haven't had coffee in a while. It's actually cold. It's still good though. Ready? I thought that you would call me. Pensé que me llamarías. Or if it's usted, llamaría. Our next category is would have. right? We finally got to would have. I know some folks like to have would have, could have, should have all in one video. Like I said, I think it just gets complicated. We're finally on to would have, and we're going to be using the conditional perfect here. I know, more grammatical terms. You're like, what's this perfect part? In English, that would be the have done something, the have part. And the verb that we use in Spanish for that is haber. Starts with an H, but the H is silent. Haber. Haber is a helping verb that means to have. The to have something, like to have a cup, you know, to have hunger, those kinds of things, because you don't say I am hungry in Spanish, say I have hunger. That is going to be tener. Tengo hambre, I have hunger. Tengo esta taza, I have this cup. Haber is a helping verb. We're going to be using the conditional perfect followed by the past participle. Past participle would be, if we take a verb in Spanish like pensar, to think, if it's AR, we change it to pensado. And I would be like, I have thought, he pensado, I have thought. That's where the participle is. So this is what it's going to look like. We'll get to the examples. I would have gone, but I was sick. So we're going to be using the conditional form of haber. Yo habría ido. I would have gone, pero estaba enfermo, but I was sick. I actually think that matches English pretty closely, so I don't think you're going to have any trouble with that, because in English we're saying I would have gone, right? And once you get used to these perfect tenses, you're like, okay, yo habría ido. I would have gone. Now, these particular constructions can get more complex if you're talking about hypotheticals, but it's going to mirror your English, you know, with the have part, so you're going to know. And it's very close to the formula I showed you before, except we're using haber. So we're going to have our first clause, or one of the clauses, they can go in either order. One of them is going to use that conditional perfect. You know, I would have something if, you know, they had or I had done something else. That other clause was going to be in the past perfect subjunctive, also known as the pluperfect subjunctive. Lots of grammatical terms. The important thing here is it's just that past subjunctive with haber. Examples make it simpler, okay? They would have come if they had had more time. We know which one to put the conditional in because the English tells us they would have come. That's our conditional. Ellos habrían venido. They would have come. Si, if they had had more time. Hubieran tenido más tiempo. And hubieran is in that past perfect subjunctive. And it's all about learning the formulas and how to conjugate. Learning how to conjugate is, I know it seems difficult at first because you're like trying to remember these things, especially the irregulars, but you know, that's just some repetition and you'll get it down. Knowing when to use them can be the challenge after that, but not if you break Spanish down into patterns, little formulas. Just follow the formula, you know? Don't overthink it, pop things in. You want to go ahead and try one? Might as well try one. I don't even know who's still watching the video at this point. You folks that are pretty much, you know, at the beginner level might have gone, that was a lot of grammatical terms, and you're already like, you know, watching videos about dogs or something, or people fall down. For the rest of you, want to try one? I would have called you, and we'll use the informal du form, but I didn't have your number. Ready? We'll do the first clause first. Te habría llamado. And that's the conditional when in there. How do we know that? Because in English, I would have called you. It was in there. But, pero, no tenía tu número. I didn't have your number. You want to try another one that's even tougher, a hypothetical? One of those big victories right here at the end? All right, let's go do it. If I had known the truth, I wouldn't have gone to the party. Feel free to stop the video if you need more time. My coffee is pretty much gone, and what's left is pretty cold. So we're going to be wrapping the video up soon. Are you ready? Let's do the first clause. If I had known the truth. Si yo hubiera sabido la verdad. And that is where our past perfect subjunctive or pluperfect subjunctive goes, right? Most important part, subjunctive in the past, hubiera. And how do we know? Because it didn't have would, right, in our English. I wouldn't have gone to the party. There's our clause with the conditional. No habría ido a la fiesta. Put it all together. Si yo hubiera sabido la verdad, no habría ido a la fiesta. So that is a classic formula in Spanish, is with that si clause. that we're going to have the past perfect subjunctive, and then in the other clause we have the conditional. Now I will tell you, if you're taking a Spanish test, follow that. And you're speaking Spanish, follow that, because I think it's easier for English speakers. But you will hear a tendency a lot in Spanish. You'll hear folks just use the past, perfect subjunctive in both clauses. So in that last example, you may see hubiera used in both clauses, or hear it when people are speaking. Si yo hubiera sabido la verdad, no hubiera ido a la fiesta. You will hear that. I recommend you stick with that, the conditional, because I just think it's easier for English speakers, and it is considered more textbook, more correct. All right. Now we have covered a lot of material. Let me just check my notes here if we have another category. We do not on my notes, so that is the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, do me a favor and give it a thumbs up. And if you really want to boost your Spanish, take it to that next level, you might want to think about joining my learning group, the Qroo Spanish Crew. You'll find a link to it in the description. Yes, there is a link to that. Maybe not all the videos I mentioned, but definitely that. And also paste at the top of the comments. All right. So until next time, hasta luego.